There's a photograph. It's become somewhat famous in fitness circles, though most people have never seen it. It shows Jack LaLanne at 80 years old, 80. And in this photograph, he's doing something that most people couldn't do at 30. He's in a perfect handstand. Not leaning against a wall, not assisted. A full, freestanding handstand with absolute control. His body is aligned perfectly. His core is engaged. His shoulders are stable. He's holding this position effortlessly, like a man who has done this thousands of times, which he has. Now, here's what makes this photograph remarkable. It's not taken in a gym. It's not taken in some controlled environment. It's from his daily practice. This is what he did every single morning. Every morning, for over 70 years, Jack LaLanne included inversion work in his routine, and when cardiologists in the 1950s heard this, they were horrified. The medical understanding at the time was very specific about inversions. Turning your body upside down, they said, was dangerous for the heart. The blood would rush to your head. The pressure in your brain would increase. The strain on your cardiovascular system would be tremendous. For a person with any cardiac history, and remember, by the 1950s, many people had some cardiac risk factor, inversions could be fatal. Not metaphorically fatal, they believed inversions could literally kill you. They said so. In writing. In medical journals. But Jack LaLanne didn't care what the establishment said. He inverted his body every single day, not recklessly, with precision, with control. And he did it with a consistency that most people reserve for brushing their teeth. He did it at 40. He did it at 60. He did it at 80. And when he did it at 95, he still maintained perfect form. This is the story of that practice. The one daily exercise that became the foundation of his extraordinary longevity, and the medical resistance that tried to stop him from doing it. Let's start with the context. In the 1950s, the cardiac world was gripped by fear. Heart disease was the leading killer. Doctors had limited tools. Drugs were crude by today's standards. Surgery was risky. And they believed the best they could do was protect the heart from stress. So any activity that stressed the heart was suspect. Any activity that elevated heart rate dramatically was dangerous. Any activity that changed blood pressure rapidly was risky. And inversions, turning your body upside down, seemed like the worst thing you could possibly do. The logic seemed airtight. The heart is a pump. The brain needs steady blood pressure. When you invert, gravity pulls blood away from the heart and toward the head. The heart has to work harder to counteract this. Blood pressure in the brain increases. This increased intracranial pressure is dangerous. It could cause a stroke. It could cause an aneurysm to rupture. It could cause hemorrhage. Therefore, inversions were not just discouraged, they were actively warned against. Medical organizations issued statements about this. They warned the public. They warned patients with any history of cardiac disease or high blood pressure to absolutely avoid inversions. Jack LaLanne's response was simple. You're wrong. He understood something that modern neuroscience and cardiovascular science now confirms. The human body is incredibly adaptive. When you expose it to a stress, any stress applied correctly and progressively, it adapts, it gets stronger, it gets more resilient. The cardiovascular system, when challenged regularly, becomes more efficient at managing blood pressure changes. The baroreceptors in the carotid arteries become more sensitive. The body learns to regulate intracranial pressure. The heart becomes more powerful. In other words, the thing that doctors said would kill you, if done correctly and consistently, was actually medicine. It was the exact kind of training that made the cardiovascular system bulletproof. But there's more to this story than just inversions, because LaLanne didn't just do handstands. He did them as part of a broader system of daily practice. He would start his morning with a cold shower, then resistance training, then inversions, then swimming or running. This wasn't random, this was systematic, and it was specifically designed to stress every system of his body in a way that would force adaptation and improvement. The cold shower triggered the sympathetic nervous system. Heart rate increased. Blood pressure spiked. The body released stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. But here's the thing. Controlled, repeated exposure to this stress creates adaptation. The heart becomes better at handling sudden changes. The cardiovascular system becomes more robust. The parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, becomes more powerful at bringing you back down. You develop nervous system resilience, then the resistance training. This is where biomechanical stress meets metabolic stress. The muscles are forced to work against gravity and external resistance. Fibers are broken down. Blood is diverted to the muscles. Heart rate elevates significantly. This sustained elevation of heart rate, done consistently, makes the heart stronger. The left ventricle, the chamber that pumps blood to the entire body, develops thicker, more powerful walls. Stroke volume increases. The heart becomes more efficient. Then, the inversions. This is the piece that doctors found most alarming, because inversions change everything about blood pressure dynamics. They force the cardiovascular system to adapt to unusual conditions. The heart has to maintain adequate perfusion to the brain while fighting gravity. The baroreceptor reflex has to activate. Blood vessel constriction and dilation have to be precisely coordinated. For someone who does inversions regularly, this becomes automatic. The body learns this pattern. The cardiovascular system becomes exquisitely adapted to handling these pressure changes, and then swimming or running. This is sustained aerobic work. Heart rate stays elevated. Breathing becomes deep and rhythmic. Oxygen delivery to tissues increases. The capillary networks expand. New blood vessels form. The mitochondria in muscle cells increase in number and function. This is endurance training. So, in one morning routine, LaLanne was hitting every single stimulus that the cardiovascular system needs to become stronger, more efficient, more resilient. He was doing all of this at an age when most people have already accepted decline. Now, let's look at the specific opposition. There are documents, real documents, from the American Heart Association, from cardiology societies, from individual physicians, warning the public about inversions. One document from 1954 says, "Inversion of the body, whether through headstands, handstands, or other means, creates excessive pressure in the cranial vault and increases risk of stroke, hemorrhage, or aneurysm rupture. Patients should avoid these activities. Healthy individuals should be cautious." LaLanne, at this exact moment in history, is on television demonstrating handstands, demonstrating the exact thing that the medical establishment is warning people to avoid. The letter that came to his television station was blunt. It was from a cardiologist in Los Angeles, a respected figure. He wrote, "We understand your programming attracts an audience, but the demonstrations of inversion exercises constitute a public health risk. We urge you to remove these segments or to add clear medical disclaimers warning viewers of the serious cardiovascular and neurological risks." The station didn't remove the segment. LaLanne kept demonstrating, and people kept doing it. Millions of people watching at home started doing handstands, started inverting their bodies, started applying the same consistency to their routines that LaLanne demonstrated. Here's what happened. They got healthier. They got stronger. Their cardiovascular systems adapted. Some people with chronic conditions, high blood pressure, heart disease, actually improved when they started practicing inversions under their own power, at their own pace, consistently. The medical establishment didn't know how to respond to this. They'd made a prediction that inversions would cause heart attacks and strokes, and the prediction wasn't coming true. In fact, the opposite seemed to be happening. People who did inversions regularly had better blood pressure control. They had fewer cardiac events. They recovered from health challenges faster. By the 1970s, some researchers started studying inversions more carefully. They found something interesting. Acute inversion, turning upside down for the first time, without preparation, could temporarily elevate intracranial pressure. But chronic inversion, practicing regularly, allowing the body to adapt, actually improved cardiovascular regulation. The body learned to handle the pressure changes. The baroreceptor system became more sensitive and responsive. Blood pressure regulation actually improved. One study, published in 1978, found that people who practiced inversions regularly had better blood pressure control than people who didn't. Not slightly better, significantly better. It was a small study, but it was real, and it confirmed what LaLanne had been saying all along. But here's what's remarkable. Even after this evidence came out, even after science started validating inversions, the medical establishment didn't exactly celebrate this. They didn't say, Jack LaLanne was right, we were wrong. Instead, medical recommendations slowly shifted. Inversions, under controlled circumstances, with proper progression, may have benefits. Very cautious, very qualified, no acknowledgement of the decades of opposition, and LaLanne just kept doing them. Every day for 70 years, from his 20s until his death at 96. The question becomes, how many people didn't do inversions because they listened to the warnings? How many people missed out on the cardiovascular benefits of this practice because they trusted the medical consensus? How many people's health would have been better, would have been extended, would have been improved if they'd done what LaLanne was doing instead of what doctors told them to do? The answer is, we don't know, but it's probably significant. Now, beyond just inversions, there's another layer to this story. Because LaLanne's daily practice wasn't just about doing exercises, it was about doing them with absolute consistency. He never missed a day. Ever. For over 70 years. There were days when he was sick. Days when he was injured. Days when he traveled. Days when he had business obligations. He did the routine anyway. Scaled back if necessary, but never skipped. This consistency is crucial, and it's something that modern fitness culture often misses. We're obsessed with intensity. We want the magical workout, the one thing that will transform our bodies. We want intensity and frequency to compensate for lack of consistency. That's backwards. Consistency beats intensity. It's not close. Over a lifetime, showing up every day, doing something well, doing it repeatedly, that is the actual medicine. LaLanne understood this intuitively. He didn't have modern sports science to tell him about neural adaptations, about how motor patterns become ingrained, about how the nervous system develops extraordinary capability through repetition. He just understood through direct observation. If you do something every day, your body adapts. If you keep stressing it the same way, it gets stronger. If you keep challenging it, it finds new ways to meet that challenge. This is why his body at 96 was so extraordinary. It wasn't because of one workout. It wasn't because of one exercise. It was 70 years of daily stress applied consistently, allowing his body to adapt incrementally, creating a compounding effect that resulted in a cardiovascular system that operated like that of a trained athlete at an age when most people are experiencing rapid decline. The medical profession looked at this and couldn't find an explanation that fit within their framework. How could one person have a heart that functions like a 50-year-old's when he's 96? The only explanations were genetics or luck or some unknown secret. Because the medical system couldn't admit that the answer was actually simple: daily practice, consistency, and willingness to do things that the establishment said were dangerous. When cardiologists finally examined his autopsy results, they found something remarkable. His coronary arteries, the arteries that supply blood to the heart muscle itself, showed almost no plaque buildup. In a 96-year-old man, this is extraordinary. Most 96-year-olds have significant coronary disease. LaLanne's were clean, more than clean. They showed evidence of extensive collateral circulation, meaning his body had developed alternative blood vessel networks. This is exactly what happens when you stress the cardiovascular system consistently over decades. The body says, "Okay, you keep demanding this of me, I'm going to build more capacity." This is the true power of what LaLanne was doing. He wasn't just exercising for health. He was systematically stressing every system of his body in a way that forced continual adaptation and improvement. And he was doing this at a time when medicine was saying that exact thing would kill him. The final piece of this story is perhaps the most important. Why did medicine get this so wrong? Why were cardiologists so certain that inversions were dangerous when the opposite was actually true? The answer lies in understanding how medicine thinks about the human body. In the 1950s, medicine was dominated by a static view of the body. The body has fixed capacities. The heart can only handle so much. You protect those capacities. You don't stress them. You certainly don't deliberately stress them, especially not in ways that seem to defy the laws of basic physiology. But the body isn't static. It's dynamic. It's adaptive. It's designed to respond to stress by becoming stronger. This is a principle that applies across all of biology. Muscles respond to resistance by growing. Bones respond to load by becoming denser. The nervous system responds to challenge by developing new capabilities. The cardiovascular system responds to demand by becoming more efficient. LaLanne understood this, whether he could articulate it in the language of modern sports science or not. And he organized his life around this principle. Everything he did was designed to stress his body appropriately, consistently, and progressively. And the result was an organism that maintained extraordinary vitality into his 10th decade. The medical profession, looking at this result, still sometimes struggles to understand how it happened. They can't fully admit that what they said was dangerous was actually medicine. They can't fully integrate the lesson that daily practice, consistency, and willingness to challenge the consensus matters more than institutional credentials. But you, watching this video, can understand it. You can see it clearly, and you can ask yourself, what else am I accepting because an institution told me to accept it? Where else might the consensus be backwards? And what would happen if I had the courage to question it, the way LaLanne did? That's the real secret that doctors didn't want you to know.